As we get further and further into civilization, the birth rates around the world and in various countries is falling. Now, we've heard a lot of different arguments from different kinds of people. Some people who are even more progressive-minded might say the reason why birth rates have fallen are due to economic troubles. They are due to the time or resource cost of having children. That if only we give women more time, more resources, more money, or more encouragement, that they will have more children, as they had in the past. I wanted to put forth a different kind of argument and a different kind of perspective on the birth rate situation that we are seeing in the world today. My perspective comes from that of a liberal-minded Christian. So here we go. It's my belief that the decline of birth rates is an inversion of the curse mentioned in the book of Genesis that was given to Eve. I believe that birth rates in the past were actually unnatural, and that they were the direct result of wickedness towards women and hopelessness on women's behalf. The birth rates of the past, women having 7, 12 children, was an act of survival and an insurance and a confirmation of what the Bible states is Eve's curse, which is that she will bear children in grief. I believe that the situation concerning women in the past, throughout most of history, was a grievous situation. Women bore children as an act of survival and not as an act of authentic desire or intentionality. I believe that in the modern era, as we go forward in time, and as we get closer to what I believe would be the end of days, I think that the Lord has had mercy on us as women. As a result of this mercy, women have gained many rights, they have gained economic independence, they've gained educational attainment, and as a result, birth rates have returned to what is more natural to humans and human nature. So yes, I believe that the decline of birth rates, down below 7, below 5, below 3 even, is natural. I think it's the natural state of childbirth, and I'll give some more explanation on that later. But as a result of the decline in birth rates, there are people who are latching onto various historical ideologies and ways of behavior, and even Christianity itself, to try and reinstitute the curses upon women in the past, the oppression of women in the past, and the wickedness that was placed on them in the past once again, to strip women of their rights in exchange for higher fertility rates for the sake of higher fertility rates. Now, like I said in the beginning, this is an inversion of how many Christians think about the past, how they think about families in the past, and childbirth in the past, and the realities of life. I believe that the female or the woman's perspective of the nuclear family and the realities of marriage and childbearing in the past are often overlooked. So Eve's curse was this. She was to bear children in grief. I believe the Bible uses a word that is commonly translated in English to be simply pain. But if you look at the native language, that scripture was written in. From what I can remember, the word is more suitable for grief, right? For pain, that kind of pain. And this aligns with the historical reality of women. Women had no economic independence, no educational opportunities, legal rights, reproductive choice, or any alternative life paths. They bore children from a survival necessity. It was a survival mechanism and an insurance that they would be provided for, be taken care of, and not be discarded by society. The reality of childbirth, in my opinion, throughout most of human history, was that children were born out of not a divine calling, not out of true love or will, but out of necessity for survival due to the harshness of life. The original command of God for mankind to be fruitful and multiply became distorted by wickedness, and it became a prison for women rather than a blessing. Now, in the Bible, we see an array of marriages and childbearing practices. We see some that can resemble more modern marriages that are one man and one woman. But we also see the historical trend of polygamy and many wives with many children. Amongst these models for marriage in the Bible, intentionality and authenticity in the marriage and within childbearing was resulting in better outcomes. Quality over quantity is on display in the Bible throughout, especially in the Old Testament, in the stories of Isaac and Rebekah, who had 2 children, in the story of Joseph, a prefiguration of Christ, who had 1 wife and just 2 children. Moses had children, I'm not sure how many, but it wasn't like he was just breeding to breed. You know, Zechariah and Elizabeth had 1 child, John the Baptist. Abraham was supposed to ideally have just 1 child with his wife, but had 2 children by way of lack of faith. So throughout the Bible in the Old Testament, we see this reoccurring theme of God not demanding or requiring a person to just breed to breed. Usually when that happens, it's a man-made concept, a man-made desire. We see that, again, the negative examples in David and Solomon. These are 2 individuals who had multiple wives and many children, with both of their situations resulting in familial dysfunction and even catastrophe for their families and for their nations. Right? We see in the story of Leah and Jacob. Leah was a wife that was forced upon Jacob by way of trickery, in a sort of divine irony for the trickery that Jacob had done to his father and to his brother. He was given a wife that he did not want. This woman felt unloved by Jacob, and she bred in order to try and make him love her. Jacob had another wife with whom he had Joseph and Benjamin, the children of the wife that he truly wanted, so just 2, whereas Leah, I believe she had 6 children. Those 6 children would go on to sell Joseph into slavery. So we see again this issue of children born out of authenticity and intentionality and true love, having a certain favoritism shown to them in the Bible, with more positive and more fluid and more gentle outcomes for them. Whereas families full of children born out of lust and a carnal desire to just breed for breeding's sake tend to result in repetitive and nonstop turmoil. So, divine favor seems to rest in the hand of children who are born from authentic and intentional marriages and relationships, and there tends to be fewer of them. Now, we view in the modern world women having less children and being more intentional about who they marry as a downside, as wickedness or selfishness, or as a sign that society is decaying. I want to invert that perspective. I believe that modern women choosing to have fewer children with partners who they truly love in more stable circumstances, which they can afford and parent more intentionally, is more aligned with the biblical patterns of quality over quantity in children. It is a deviation from this breed or perish, reproduce or suffer, have children or be discarded mentality that has latched itself onto humans as a result of living in a fallen world. And the presumption that mass reproduction for the sake of reproduction is a very carnal and worldly view of human life and reproduction, in my opinion. Paul, in the New Testament, I believe he stated that he wished that everyone could remain marriageless and childless as he had, but that it was not possible due to the burning passion and temptations and lust that exist in mankind. Was he mistaken in this? Was he speaking against the word of God? I don't think so. Like I said, David and Solomon, in terms of marriage and childbirth, represent unmoderated reproduction that constructed both physical, worldly, and spiritual negative outcomes. Their excess in this created toxic family dynamics, lack of justice, competing interests and jealousies, rivalries, and the eventual downfall of the entire family and nation at hand. Whereas figures like Isaac, Joseph, Moses, Zechariah, who had limited but intentional reproduction with committed monogamous relationships, produced lasting and significant offspring without family destruction. So, to sum it all up, I believe that the very high birth rates of the past were soiled by human wickedness and carnal desire and a desire to survive. That women had no choice in the past, and that the state of things in the past were not ideal. The current decline in birth rates represents a lifting of Eve's curse, a releasing of it, and not the granting of another curse, and not the wrongdoing of modern women. The decline in the birth rates, in my opinion, represents a lifting of humanity from this survival breeding mentality, this animalistic breed for breeding's sake mentality, a return to more intentional and chosen and authentic motherhood, a restoration in that ezer kenegdo helpmate partnership, where women choose their partners and are a true partner to them and not a slave or a breeding tool or, something to oppress. So let us, as both liberals and Christians, contend with realities that remove some basic assumptions that you might be making that you might not know that you're making. Let's contend with the possible reality that the declining birth rates around the world are not a result of wickedness, but actually a result of the release or the lifting of wickedness and the lifting of constraints. To argue for the removal of women's rights for the sake of reproduction is a return to this carnal and animalistic survival breeding practice that is beneath humans and is beneath human nature and is beneath the civilization that we have built. Stripping women's rights for higher fertility represents an attempt by the wicked among us to reimpose a curse that the Lord has begun to ease. So perhaps the declining birth rates are not a sign of civilizational collapse, but rather a sign of restoration. Women finally free to choose authentic motherhood rather than compulsory breeding. And I think this is a good way for us liberal-minded Christians to transform the conversation from decline and fall, which appeals to the fanatical and to the radical among us, to the overzealous and the quick to oppress and to stifle and so on and so forth. That decline and fall framing appeals to those kinds of people, but to the peacemakers and to the long-term thinkers and to those who care about freedom and happiness, we can frame this declining birth rate situation not as something that represents decline and fall, but rather liberation and restoration. After all, I believe it was only 100 or so years ago that the population of the entire Earth was about 1 billion. Within 100 years, it skyrocketed to 8 billion. There is no reason to be afraid or to feel like the sky is falling because children aren't being pumped out of women as they had been in the past 100 years. We have more than enough people. Children are a beautiful thing. We're not overpopulated. There's enough land for all of us and enough resources. So that's not where my argument is coming from. But I believe that more intentional and authentic childbirth and marriages are a good thing, that they are better than what we had been doing in the past. So I believe that over the next few decades or so, you'll begin to hear many, many arguments and many political arguments concerning women's rights as it relates to childbirth. We have a tweet here on the screen from someone who says, the only way, strong statement only, the only way to fix another strong insinuation that there is something to fix fertility rates is to make women directly economically dependent on one man. That is it. That is the fix. No one wants to hear it, but it's true. What this individual is asserting, if you go along with their assumptions, is correct. There is a way to increase fertility rates, which is to strip women of their civil rights and to provide no other way for them to ensure their future survival than to bear children for a man who can then provide for them. However, I don't believe it is the only way, and I don't believe that it is something necessarily broken with society today, with the worldwide decline in birth rates. So a greater political mind than me can listen to my argument here in this video and try and come up with ways to politically counter what I foresee as being a great future battle over women's rights as a result of the declining birth rate and mankind's carnal and persistent desire to breed for the sake of breeding at the cost of doing good by women and for the price of their oppression.